You speak about a really interesting concept, paradoxical pairs, about having strength in two seemingly really different characteristics. Tell me more about what that is and why that's so important.
It's really powerful insight if you're building a business. As human beings, we need to have traits that seem opposite but actually are very complementary. We can talk about communication, where you need to have the ability to be frank in some situations and diplomatic in other situations. That they go together because you need to apply that trait depending upon what the situation is presenting to you. A good example of this is a friend of mine who decided to take up boxing. We all thought he was nuts to take up boxing, but he's a high challenge kind of guy, and he was going to take up boxing. So we were all out there to support him when he went into the ring for what was the first, and I will point out, the last time. Now, I've got to say in his defense that he did not get the snot beat out of him. However, he didn't win the fight. And he thought, I've really satisfied my need to learn to box. But when we were talking about paradoxes one day, he said, it's really like fighting. And I said, how so? And he said, well, when you go into the ring, you have two punches. You have the left jab, which is the basic punch, but you also have the right cross. And you need both punches because you don't know what's going to be thrown at you. So you want the ability to respond with the appropriate punch. If you got into the ring and all you had was a left jab, you probably never win. If all you have is the power punch, the right cross, you better hope you knock the guy out really quickly. The better fighters are going to have mastery of both, and that's what you're looking for. What Paradox can do for you also as a leader is it can help you explain some of the counterproductive behaviors in your organization. Because at the root of Paradox, what we're really talking about is balance. The better balanced people are, the more effective they are. And so there are some key paradoxes that when you look at it, you can get to an imbalance and can have a negative impact. One of the things that led me to wanting to develop the people equation was a failure we had in hiring a guy who turned out to be highly authoritarian. And what we couldn't get him to do was to balance that with the ability to collaborate and engage his people. As people move through the ranks and develop professionally, and particularly move into management positions and senior management positions, they need the ability to make a decision. They need the ability to take responsibility for a decision. They also need to enroll people because they have no direct control over the outcome. So if you don't have balance, what you have is a person who is not just good at authority, but is authoritarian. And that begins to alienate people and can create a lack of morale. So when we see a lot of behaviors in an organization, they're really the result of an imbalance in some complementary traits. And getting tuned in to some of those paradoxes can give you some really good insight in how to take counterproductive behaviors out of a culture. In the book, I talk about a number of studies that have been done on derailing behavior. And what you find is that there are a lot of executives who are very talented and have some early successes, but can't sustain that success. They derail at some point. And when you look at the derailing factors, it's those imbalances. They'll be authoritarian rather than collaborative and exercising that appropriately. There will be others that really create counterproductive behavior and derail. And so if you see some of those derailing behaviors in your organization, look for balance.
One of the interesting things I've found about the paradoxical pairs is I could see where if I tended to have one of these characteristics, in other words, I lacked balance in one of the pairs, I might be swayed to choose someone who had that same lack of balance because I think that that's the right characteristic or the right direction. Does that happen with people as they're making selections?
It does, actually, and I can give you an instance of that. I was working for a company, and they had a very high-performing business unit up in Boston, and being led by a very dynamic woman who was just really knocking the cover off the ball. And they decided that it would be good if I went up and just provided them the data on their team. I really wasn't going to engage fully with them, but could I go up and just tell them what was driving that culture? And they were very interested in what was driving that culture. And what we found were very high-performing people, very highly self-motivated people. One of the interesting things about that culture is all of the senior executives were highly blunt. They were straight shooters, direct, put it on the table, and when we looked at it and I said, you know, that's an imbalance, they said, but we like it. Fine. That's what you want in your culture. I did say what you want to be very sensitive to, however, is there is a trait that I look at in the Harrison assessment that's tolerance of bluntness. Make sure when you're hiring somebody that they have a high tolerance of bluntness, because that's characteristic of your culture. I'm not making a judgment on whether you want it to be that way or not. What was interesting was I had no further engagement with them, and a number of years later I was asked by this company to help them on an executive recruitment issue. And I asked about her. I said, how's she doing? And he goes, well, she's gone. And I said, she's gone? She left? Oh, no, we drove her out. Why did you drive her out? Well, you know, she came up to corporate. And I immediately knew why. The CEO of that company has one of the lowest tolerances of bluntness that I have ever experienced. And here she came in, this ball of fire, straight talk and whatever, and he just couldn't tolerate it. She wouldn't fit that culture. She lacked balance. Had I known she was going, I would have given, you need now to exercise that other trait, because it's not going, what is your success model now is not going to be a success model for you in this new environment, because you're going to encounter different situations, and that's not going to give you the leverage that you want.